Hi, I'm Nafisa Latic, and this is Across the Balkans. We begin in Bulgaria, where MPs voted in favor of a declaration that could open the path for North Macedonia's EU membership. Bulgaria's parliament accepted the French proposal that could allow the government to lift its veto on the opening of negotiations for the accession of North Macedonia and Albania. The veto was first issued in 2020 for both countries, as Albania's EU talks are bracketed in one package with North Macedonia. Bulgaria insisted that North Macedonia must formally recognize that its language and identity have Bulgarian roots. The deal is intended to overcome a series of tensions between Sofia and Skopje over language, history, and the rights of ethnic Bulgarians in North Macedonia. The vote came a day after Ukraine and Moldova were both granted EU candidate status, which is seen as a response to Russia's attacks on Ukraine. Many warn that keeping Western Balkan countries out of the EU would allow Russia to strengthen its grip in the region. The proposal is now waiting approval by Skopje.
I would love to see us in the European Union. That would be good for us. But they don't want to take us. They just don't like us. They should have taken us on board 30 years ago, not now. We've been lied to.
The European Union is playing some dangerous game. Ever since the beginning, since the Greek veto, since we had to change the name. It's hard to defend our position. We are a small nation and we are not united in this. We need to unite.
I think it's good that we refuse the so-called French proposal. Maybe we do not need the European at any cost, because if we lose our identity, if we lose our history, cultural heritage, all of that was fought for by our ancestors. We can't lose that now.
The European Union has no clear enlargement policies towards the Western Balkans. And if countries who aspire to join the EU face delays, they will reorientate their policies. And then we will have an increase of Russian and Chinese influence in the Western Balkans. And this will create problems within the EU itself. This will raise nationalism that can end up in armed conflicts. The EU should take such developments under consideration.
The vote on lifting the veto comes 2 days after the Bulgarian government collapsed, sending the country into its latest political crisis. Opposition lawmakers toppled the government of Prime Minister Kirill Petkov only 6 months after taking power. Members of parliament voted for a no-confidence motion against Petkov over disputes on spending and North Macedonia's EU accession. Petkov, a Harvard graduate who had pledged to tackle corruption, has taken a strong pro-European and pro-NATO stance since Russia launched its attack on Ukraine 4 months ago. He fired his defense minister in February over differences on Ukraine and backed EU sanctions against Russia. Petkov faced criticism for reversing Sofia's traditionally warm ties with Moscow. Bulgaria is expected to hold its 4th general election in just over a year, putting at risk millions of euros from EU recovery funds and its plans to join the Eurozone in 2024. To get more on this, I'm joined by Ivailo Ditchev. He's a political analyst and professor of cultural anthropology at the University of Sofia. Thank you so much for being with us on Across the Balkans.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us more about this French deal on EU membership that the Bulgarian parliament accepted last week. Is this a way to bring in the EU as a guarantor in this process?
Yes, the paradox is that everybody is unhappy about this deal. 2/3 of Bulgarians think it is a bad thing, and in Skopje we saw protests against it. So this is, first of all, it's not a French deal. It's a deal elaborated by the European Council, European Commission, and actually the European institutions. And it actually follows the requests of Bulgaria towards Macedonia, so that our side should be very happy about it. But actually, it isn't, and that's a question. Why is it like that? I don't understand, actually.
Yeah, we didn't hear much. We didn't hear much from North Macedonian side as of now. They say they are waiting for the final French deal, the details of that deal to find out. Meanwhile, Petkov urged his North Macedonian counterpart to be brave and accept the compromise. He says, and let me read this quote of him: "I think this is the decision Dimitar Kovacevski, the Prime Minister of North Macedonia, has to do now. If I was him on his side, I would not even think twice. If he can go in history by opening the door for North Macedonia into the EU, I think it's a good achievement for a prime minister. But it takes guts." It does, Professor, right? As this is the issue that collapsed Petkov's government.
Yes, it takes guts, and of course they paid for this deal by their government. Now, what Petkov managed to do is to shift the emphasis in this deal from history and language, which is also an issue between our two countries, towards something else, which is much more European, namely the human rights of the Bulgarians in North Macedonia. So that he introduced one point, which is to introduce Bulgarians as founding people, as they call it, of the Macedonian state. And this should be something acceptable for Macedonians. It is actually, but of course, after so many years of conflict, it will be very difficult.
It wasn't easy for Kirill Petkov. He admitted himself it was a difficult choice to make. What is his future now? When will he have to face new elections?
Yesterday he handed over his resignations, and consultations for forming a new government started. Now we are in a very difficult situation. Bulgaria resembles in a way what is happening in Israel nowadays. They will have a fifth elections. We will have a fourth one, and again the situation is very similar, because the government was formed by very desperate political forces, left and right, populist and more serious parties, under the move towards fighting corruption. And on the other side, we have the new situation with the war in Ukraine, which all of a sudden created a new situation. One of the parties is against us helping Ukraine. Now this Macedonian issue as well, so that this anti-corruption front has been dissolved, and we will have either some sort of program government for 6 months or for a year, because we have a very urgent issues to settle with the European Fund for Recovery and Development. We need to change a lot of laws this year. If we don't have a parliament this year, we will lose something like 12 billion of leva. That's an enormous sum for Bulgaria. Then we need to prepare for the euro, for accepting the euro as a currency.
Right, lots of work ahead. Can Bulgaria even afford to have another election? But you mentioned one important thing that I do want to refer to. Besides North Macedonia issue, the issue of corruption. This outgoing government supported the EU prosecutor who was supposed to look into the corruption that has been impacting Bulgaria for decades now. How significant will the fight against corruption be in the next parliamentary elections?
I'm afraid that with this toppling of the government, this fight against corruption will not be very active. The European prosecutor started, I think, one prosecution in Bulgaria, but that's a very slow thing. There will not be an immediate effect of her actually proceedings, so that the population will be very angry because prices are rising. We have a inflation of like 12%, 13% now because of gas, because of oil, so that this anti-corruption move will be on a pause. I don't think that this year we'll have something new, but there are other issues that are very important in Bulgaria. As you know, this country traditionally is very close to Russia, so that this war in Ukraine divided our country. Something like 48% of the people are on the Russian side. Half of the population actually supports the Putin criminal regime. And Petkov, of course, was very pro-European, pro-Atlantic. But on the other side...
Is this a significant historical time for Bulgaria to decide which way will it go?
Yes, that's a very important moment. And I think this is also one of the reasons for the toppling of the government, because Petkov, first, he refused to buy Russian gas with rubles, which is the European decision on the matter. Then he did various gestures, like, for instance, they didn't let Lavrov fly over Bulgaria by plane, which is symbolically was interesting. So that a new government formed by those who are against him might turn Bulgaria towards Russia, and this will be a very bad thing.
Thank you so much for your insight. I really appreciate Professor Ditchev. It's time to look at some other stories making headlines in the region this week. Western Balkan and European leaders have met once again to discuss the EU's enlargement process. But the talks have made no progress in seeing Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo joining the bloc. The meeting was held on the same day the EU granted Ukraine and Moldova candidate status, and a day before the Bulgarian government voted to lift its veto on North Macedonia and Albania's bids. Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić met a delegation from the Italian car maker Fiat in Kragujevac after workers held a protest. They demanded that those who do not want to work in Fiat's factories abroad can keep their jobs in Kragujevac. They also called for greater job security and higher severance pay. And the Bosnian coastal town of Neum welcomed one of the largest cruise ships in the world. The Bolet cruise ship, carrying over 1,000 passengers, kicked off its journey from the Bahamas. On top of being the biggest cruise ship Bosnia has ever welcomed, it also becomes the first to pass under the recently built Pelješac bridge that connects Croatia's mainland with its southernmost region. Some residents have criticized the entry of the ship into the Bosnian seaside. Now I want to jump to a long-running issue that has affected the Balkans. How countries can better utilize their diaspora communities. As we discussed many times before on this program, Southeastern Europe is facing one of the world's sharpest declines in population. One reason behind it is emigration, due to a lack of jobs and low salaries. But now Balkan countries are looking to their diaspora communities as a way to reverse their brain drain. The potentials are enormous, from job creation, better training and investment. Like, for example, Gezime Feyzi, who worked in Italy for years and is now the only mozzarella cheese producer in North Macedonia. Bekim Laci went to Gostivar, her hometown, to see how the business is going.
Gezime Feyzi is the woman who introduced mozzarella to North Macedonia and remains the country's only producer of the popular style of cheese. She and her husband worked in Italy for many years, but after gaining the skills and experience, they decided to bring their know-how back to their birthplace, Gostivar, where they founded Caseificio Cesarina Feyzi, a mozzarella factory. Gezime has since built the image of a successful businesswoman in an industry that was almost entirely exclusive to men. But she says fighting prejudice and stereotypes was just one part of the battle.
Shumë pak njerëz e njihnin mozzarellën. Kur fillova të shkoj nga Shkupi dhe të ofroj restoranteve, të tregoj, disa e njihnin, disa nuk kishin dëgju. Gostivari nuk e njihte fare, më të them edhe gurbeqarët po. Mirë po gurbeqarët nuk ishin pa këtu, se ka një shitore mozzarella apo këtinve djathnave dhe do të blenë. Fillimisht kur këtë kishim një dyqan, kur vishin të blejnë fëmijët apo këto komshit, këtu sente dhe thyshin, më jep vojë të qërume. Prej vitit 2003 deri më sot, ende nuk ka dhe një fabrik tjetër që mund të bëje mozzarellën.
They now produce around 600 kilograms of mozzarella a day, which they distribute to hundreds of restaurants. And while the demand is high, production is not, as in the past few years, people have left rural areas in droves.
Nuk mund ta mbulojmë krejt tregun e Maqedonisë për shkak se kena mungesë të qumshtit. Edhe kur kena pas qumsht, për të bërë mozzarellë të mirë apo kashkavall, duhet kesh një qumsht cilësor. E din, të ketë yndyrë mjaftueshëm, mos ketë prezencë të ujtit në qumsht, proteine, më thash, po edhe mungon qumsht për shkak se njerëzit ma shkojnë në perëndim, i shitën kafshët, edhe jo interesimi i shtetit, mos pagesa e rregullt e subvencioneve.
And while many North Macedonians have moved abroad, the government is now looking for ways to tempt them to invest back home. But that isn't without obstacles. North Macedonia has established several industrial development zones, a tax haven for foreign investors. But the country has failed to attract the diaspora, whose potentials are huge but underused. They were simply put off by the bureaucracy and also the discrimination they faced just until recently, as they were not treated as foreign investors eligible to use the benefits. And those who do want to invest have their doubts.
Jo çka shtrohet si dilemë këto është si mundet Maqedonia të ketë kushtet mira për investimet e huaja direkte në zonat teknologjike zhvillimore industriale, nëse këto benefite as pak nuk i shfrytëzon diaspora vendore. Kjo të tregon se ato kanë një rezistencë ndaj institucioneve publike vendore, ndaj procedurave të stërngarkuara që janë, ndaj komplikimeve që ato i hasin në rast se dëshirojnë të investojnë këtu.
Edmond Ademi led North Macedonia's Diaspora Ministry from 2017 to 2020. He says it was only in 2018 that reforms were made to entice the diaspora community to invest.
Me inicimin e ndryshimit të ligjit, neni 33, praktikisht për herë të parë futëm mundësinë ku shteti mund për krah investime nga diaspora. Investimet, siç e dini, të huaja kanë përkrahje prej 10% nga shteti. Në këtë rast, investitorët që vinë nga diaspora kanë 20% përkrahje nga shteti apo deri në 1 milion euro si sumë totale.
But that doesn't mean expats keep all their savings to themselves. Despite lack of investments, North Macedonia still benefits from its diaspora through the money they send back home. The National Bank of North Macedonia estimates that since 2009 it has exceeded $1 billion per year. The money is spent mostly on real estate, tourism, weddings, and most recently on dental services during holidays, usually in the summer. And they help sustain businesses even beyond those 3 months.
Për ne është shumë me rëndësi mërkimtare, çka që vellot tona që i punojmë janë më të punuar dhe normalisht që çmimet janë pak më të larta se standardet. Ja u dim edhe datat se kur vinë në Maqedoni dhe i presim me shumë qejf, shkaku që na i vlerësojnë shumë më shumë punën tonë.
Mirë, po jo vetëm edhe gjatë pushimeve verore, po tash me këto fluturimet komerciale, ato vinë edhe gjatë vitit shpesh, i kryjnë obligimet me dhëmbët edhe kthejnë. Normal, tash me këto mediat sociale, shumë letë vinë kontakt me neve, pyesin, bëjmë gati të gjitha punimet me larg, domethënë edhe mandej vetëm vinë këtu edhe kryjnë obligimet e tyre.
But that influx of cash is at risk of dwindling away without much to show for in the long run. In an email, the World Bank office in Skopje told me that many locals need that money to get by. The North Macedonian government now plans to establish a network of successful citizens worldwide to help promote the country. And it might not have much time left to take action. Second or third generation North Macedonians living abroad now outnumber the first, and they aren't as attached to their homeland. Bekim Laci, TRT World, Skopje, North Macedonia.
My guest today is Adam Berberovich. He's a Bosnian professional living in Sweden who works closely on connecting the Balkan diaspora. He's also a board member of Restart. That's a non-profit organization that works on connecting people living abroad. Adnan, thank you for your time for Across the Balkans.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, you lived abroad for so many years. How do you think people like you can help their home countries?
Thank you for the question. There are so many ways one can help. I would say divide this in three categories. One is the knowledge, two is the connections and networks, and three is the experience and the insights. So to start with knowledge, it's I think very important to say that diaspora, Western Balkan diaspora, accumulate a lot of knowledge abroad, and I think this knowledge can be shared with young people. It can be shared with people in the same area of expertise in your country. So I would say organize different kind of summer schools, webinars, or just kind of piggyback on things, or I would say organizations that are doing such things. So the second one is, of course, connections and networks. And of course, by living and working abroad, you build quite extensive networks. So this network can be used in different ways. First of all, you can build your own company. You can share these connections with someone else that has some company. And of course, you can use it to help and donate your home country. And I would say the third thing is, of course, experiences and insights. So by living abroad, you gather so many experiences and insights, so that can be shared elsewhere. So of course, by sharing these experiences and know-how, you can actually contribute to your culture, and you can influence others to help the country thrive.
As I understand, this is exactly what you're doing at the Restart. You are helping people in diaspora communities to connect and become investors in their home countries. So how does this work?
That's correct. So Restart was founded 6 years ago. It actually came across because I was involved in different networks in Sweden specifically, and I saw that there is a huge need actually to do something back home. So we founded Restart, and we're focusing on three areas. First of all, to promote business opportunities. So we actually have a one-stop shop where we help diaspora or any other investors to start their companies and manage their companies in Bosnia specifically. We've also developed a business guide, so that can be downloaded for free on our website. That gives you a lot of facts and information if you want to run business in Bosnia. But also, second part is to.
And how can this help? How can this help economies of your countries in your context, Bosnia?
Of course, I mean, this can, first of all, when you start a new company or a branch of a company, create new jobs, new job opportunities. There is exchange of knowledge, the exchange of culture, business culture, and so on, which really helps a lot of people locally. So, I mean, this is definitely something very important for the local economy, for the development of the local economy, because we don't see that many foreign investments like in the Western Balkans, unfortunately, specifically in Bosnia. So these are the ways, basically, where you can actually boost I would say business development locally.
How big a role could diaspora communities play for the future of the Western Balkans? How strong is their influence at the moment, and how can it be even better?
I would say it could play a very significant role, as Western Balkan diaspora is participating very much in the societies where they live in, both politically, culturally, and economically. And this can basically be brought back home and, of course, create some influence in the countries that people come from by, again, connecting people and actually bringing back the networks of people and connections that you have built. So I would say also second piece is it's very important to participate in democratic processes, of course, by voting for the people that can vote in the countries where they come from, so they can actually influence, I would say, the future of the countries directly. So these are some of my thoughts.
Some say that money and investment sent back to Bosnia is almost as crucial as tourism is for Croatia, neighboring Croatia, for example. Would you agree with that?
I think if you look at the numbers are telling us that this could be compared. If you look at the GDP of Croatia 2020 was 20% coming from tourism. In Bosnia, remittances, including, of course, pensions from abroad, are coming up to 13%. Plus, I mean, if you add on top of that direct spend that people that from diaspora when they actually are visiting and they're doing things in the countries, I think it definitely can sum up to the numbers that we see that tourism brings in Croatia. So, and that's definitely something that...
Do you, Adnan, at the end, do you plan to return one day and bring home what you learned abroad? Like Gezime Feyzi, we had a story from North Macedonia before. She returned from Italy to open a mozzarella factory.
Yeah, and I get that. So, I mean, in one of the interviews that I had previously, I said that one should not really wait for retirements to go back home, which many people are doing. I'm, of course, considering moving back, and I'm working on a plan to do that. Where exactly I'm going to return to, I'm not exactly sure, but it's definitely going to be in the region, and I hope it's going to be sooner than later. So that's my plan.
Thank you so much, Adnan, and good luck with your work. Thanks again for joining us. We'll continue to follow how Balkan countries are looking to tap their potential of their diaspora communities living around the world. Thanks for watching this episode of Across the Balkans. See you next time. Bye-bye for now.